Subscribe now if you value serious historical analysis that actually sharpens your self-reliance. This channel exists for people who understand that history is not nostalgia. It is instruction. During the Second World War, when global supply chains collapsed and synthetic fertilizers were diverted to explosives production, several nations quietly leaned on a plant that could rebuild soil without factories' imports or industrial chemistry. It restored nitrogen naturally, fed both humans and livestock, and regenerated exhausted farmland year after year. It was called comfrey. For a brief moment in wartime Europe and Britain, it was treated as an agricultural saviour. Then, almost as quickly, it vanished from mainstream farming. Let's look at what happened and why that disappearance matters. The wartime nitrogen crisis forced governments to rethink soil fertility. Modern agriculture depends heavily on synthetic nitrogen fertilizers produced through the Haber-Bosch process. During the Second World War, those same nitrogen compounds were essential for manufacturing explosives. Fertilizer production shrank as munitions took priority. Imports were disrupted by naval blockades. Farmers faced declining yields, especially in countries like Britain that were already dependent on imported food. Governments responded with aggressive dig-for-victory campaigns, pushing citizens to convert lawns and public spaces into food plots. But expanding cultivation is pointless if soil fertility collapses. That is where nitrogen-fixing systems and nutrient-accumulating plants became critical. Comfrey was promoted as a regenerative forever plant during wartime Britain. Comfrey, particularly the Bocking strains developed in the United Kingdom, became known for extraordinary biomass production. Its deep taproots can reach several feet into the subsoil, mining minerals that shallow-rooted crops simply cannot access. Those nutrients are stored in large leaves that regrow rapidly after cutting. In wartime Britain, comfrey was cultivated to produce green manure and high-protein livestock fodder without dependence on imported feed or industrial fertilizer. It was called a forever plant because once established, it returns year after year with minimal input. You can cut it multiple times a season. Each cutting becomes mulch, compost activator, or animal feed. In a resource-starved wartime economy, that regenerative cycle was, honestly, just invaluable. Its biological advantages made it strategically powerful. Comfrey does not fix nitrogen the way legumes do, but it functions as a dynamic accumulator. Its roots draw potassium, calcium, magnesium, and trace minerals upward. And when those leaves decompose, the nutrients return to the topsoil. Farmers effectively created closed nutrient loops. Wartime trials demonstrated that compost piles layered with comfrey broke down faster and produced richer humus. Livestock fed with controlled amounts of comfrey leaves showed improved condition when conventional feed was scarce. For smallholders managing limited acreage, this plant reduced reliance on purchased inputs. In survival terms, that is strategic autonomy. A plant that restores fertility, feeds animals, and accelerates compost production reduces external dependency. So why did this agricultural asset disappear after the war? The answer lies in post-war industrial expansion. After 1945, synthetic fertilizers became abundant and cheap. Petrochemical industries scaled up massively. Governments promoted high-yield monoculture farming supported by chemical inputs. These systems favoured predictability and mechanization over regenerative cycles. Comfrey posed practical challenges for large-scale industrial agriculture. It spreads aggressively if not managed carefully. Mechanical harvesting is difficult compared to broadcast fertilizer application. And, chemical fertilizer companies had little incentive to promote a plant that reduced product demand. There were also health controversies. Some comfrey species contain pyrrolizidin alkaloids, which, are compounds that can be harmful to the liver if consumed improperly. While certain strains were bred for safer agricultural use, public concern grew, particularly around medicinal consumption. Regulatory caution further reduced enthusiasm. The plant was not erased through conspiracy. It was sidelined because industrial agriculture optimized for scale, not resilience. Efficiency in the short term displaced long-term soil regeneration. The historical lesson is about systems, not a miracle crop. It's really tempting to frame comfrey as a lost miracle, but honestly, that just oversimplifies the issue. The real lesson here is that wartime necessity forced people to create decentralized fertility systems. After the war, post-war abundance, it encouraged centralized chemical dependency, and I think serious historians should really note how crises reshape agricultural knowledge. When survival is at stake, governments tend to revive traditional and regenerative practices. Yet, when stability returns, industrial convenience often replaces them. This pattern, it appears again and again. Victory gardens fade away. Seed-saving declines. Soil-building knowledge becomes, kind of niche. The Second World War comfrey movement fits right into that larger arc. Now, let's talk about how you can apply this knowledge in practical modern terms. If you manage land, even just a small garden, the wartime model actually offers some actionable steps. One approach is to establish a controlled patch of comfrey in a contained bed or bordered area. It's best to choose non-invasive or sterile varieties whenever possible. Once your comfrey is established, you'll want to cut the leaves several times during each growing season. Then simply layer those leaves directly around heavy feeders, like tomatoes, maize, or squash. The leaves break down quickly, feeding soil microbes and returning mined nutrients to the root zone. Alternatively, you can steep cut leaves in water for several weeks to create a nutrient-rich liquid feed. Make sure to dilute before applying to crops. If you keep livestock, small, carefully managed additions of comfrey can supplement feed during scarcity, though, proper research and moderation are absolutely essential. The broader strategy is more important than the plant itself. Build fertility from within your system rather than importing it. Even compost management improves, honestly. Add chopped comfrey between brown carbon layers to accelerate decomposition. You are replicating the wartime compost accelerators that kept British allotments productive under blockade conditions. For preppers and homesteaders, the principle is straightforward. Every input you can generate on site increases resilience. Soil fertility is not a seasonal concern. It is a strategic asset. The deeper historical takeaway is about dependency versus autonomy. World War II demonstrated that industrial agriculture is vulnerable to geopolitical disruption. Fertilizer factories can be bombed, trade routes can close, petrochemical inputs can be redirected. A regenerative plant that returns each year without supply chains becomes more than a crop. It becomes insurance. Comfrey was not erased because it failed. It was displaced because the economic model changed. For those serious about long-term preparedness, that distinction matters. If you found value in this analysis, subscribe to The Prepper Historian and share this with someone who takes soil and self-reliance seriously. History is full of forgotten systems that kept societies alive under pressure. The question is whether we learn from them before the next crisis forces us to.